sports utility vehicle. Among the most popular cars of our time. Is it an all-terrain rough rock raider or a pavement princess? The scourge of the suburbs. Welcome everyone to episode 77 of the Automotive History series, where we take a look at the history of the SUV. First, we have some cleaning up to do. In some parts of the world, anything and everything is sold as an SUV these days. Even if it's a slightly jacked up city car-sized hatchback, the marketing machine will proudly tell you that it's one mean son of a gun that can handle a steep hill, a pothole, a curb, smooth pavement. So where does this go wrong? Well, there are quite a few terms that are applied to this type of vehicle, like SUV, crossover, 4x4, off-roader, Jeep, four-wheel drive, ATV, and, if you live in the UK, a Chelsea tractor. Upon closer look, most of these terms describe one and the same thing. ATV stands for all-terrain vehicle. Technically, an SUV fits this description, but ATVs are an entirely different breed. 4x4 is the reference to the four-wheel drive system, and so is the four-wheel drive term. Then there is Jeep, which is a brand of SUVs and all-terrain vehicles, but also a broader term. In fact, the term Jeep was already in use before the brand was officially founded. Offroader describes actually what it's capable of, being able to handle terrain that's off the road. And that leaves us with these two, SUV and crossover. Is there any distinction between these two? Yes and no. By now, we know that the SUV can be a rugged all-terrain vehicle. The crossover is its softer brother. The body style is a crossover of many different body styles. A little bit of everything. A bit of a hatchback, a bit of a station wagon, a bit of an SUV. In some parts of the world, and especially in Europe, these two are almost the same. Anything that could be considered a crossover is sold as an SUV. But it seems like places like the United States have a clearer distinction. If a vehicle with an increased ride height is built on a commercial platform, like that of a van or a pickup truck, then it's considered an SUV. Think of the full-size Chevrolet Suburbans, which are a derivative of the Chevrolet Silverado pickup trucks. But as soon as the vehicle with an increased ride height is built on a regular passenger car platform, then it's considered a crossover. Like my dad's Volkswagen Tiguan. It's a mid-sized SUV in Europe, but a compact crossover in the USA. But where did it all start? For this episode, I'm going to give it my definition and cut it up in three phases. The development of the off-roader, the development of the SUV, which I consider to be a luxury off-roader, and the development of the crossover. edsautoreviews proudly presents Automotive Art Emporium, the official merch store. That's right, over at Eds Emporium, you can find the finest in automotive art made by yours truly. Whether it's a plate you want to hang on your wall in your home or garage, or magnets and stickers that you want to stick on the rear bumper of your classic ride, or expand your wardrobe with some car-themed apparel, I'm sure you're gonna love these designs. All designs are made by me and my own ideas, no AI trickery involved, for classic car owners that can handle a joke, and more designs get added along the way. By buying an artwork, you get to hang something nice on your wall, and I get to work on my retirement plans. So visit your local Eds Automotive Art Emporium by searching for edsautoreviews.dashery.com or click the link in the description and get your awesome automotive art today. What was the first off-roader? Well, technically speaking, one could argue if the carriages and coaches built before cars weren't actually all off-roaders. They certainly had massive wheels, increased ride height, horse-wheel drive, and were almost exclusively driven off the road since modern roads weren't invented yet. Ha! But when you see footage like this, showing the all-terrain capabilities of a Ford Model T isn't only a standard passenger car, but also a terrific off-roader. You know the term KISS? Keep it simple, stupid? Well, I wouldn't be surprised if a basic and simple Model T from a century ago would outperform modern-day off-roaders with the complex suspension systems when it comes to a muddy hill climb. But I digress. As much as cars like the Model T offered great off-road ability thanks to their ride height and very flexible underpinnings, they weren't true off-roaders. A common characteristic that is applied to off-roaders and SUVs is that they come with four-wheel drive. The Model T didn't. In that case, the Dutch Spyker 60 HP is considered the literal king of the hill climb. It's by many agreed to be the very first regular car ever to feature the very first six-cylinder, as well as the very first four-wheel drive system. In the meantime, cars that did not have four-wheel drive were converted into what are called half-tracks. The rear wheels were replaced by a set of continuous or caterpillar tracks, so to combine the steering capabilities and comfort of a car with the traction of pretty much a tank. This setup was used in numerous applications, ranging from ambulances to luxury state vehicles to army machines. But the real off-road cars as we know them today came around during and after the Second World War. In general, three major countries and cars can be named. From the USA, we have the Jeep, from the UK and Europe, the Land Rover, and from Japan or Asia, the Toyota Land Cruiser. Not to mention that there are numerous other countries with their own version on this theme. But let's start with the USA. During the war, most armies were in need of a small, basic, easy-to-maintain jack-of-all-trades that was able to handle any terrain. The US Army and car industry developed a car that goes by many names like the Willys MB and the Ford GPW, but is universally known as the Jeep. Weighing just under 2,500 pounds or around 1,000 kilos, it was powered by a 2.2-liter four-cylinder and had four-wheel drive. It was essentially the Ford Model T of the Second World War. Some argue that the US and Allied troops couldn't have won the war without the trusty old Jeeps. The success of the American Jeep inspired engineers over at the British Rover Company to create a similar concept right after the Second World War ended. After some trying and testing, they created the center steer concept car, where the driver was sitting in the middle of the car. Interesting to note is that Rover deliberately chose to create a rugged all-terrain vehicle for agricultural purposes, instead of sending it straight to the British Army. The center steer was a tractor turned into a car. The concept car eventually evolved to become the Land Rover Series 1, released in 1948. And then there is Toyota with the Land Cruiser. In 1950, the US Army ordered that an updated version of the Willys Jeep would be built by Toyota. The result was a spin-off of the American Jeep, the Toyota Jeep BJ. The car was slightly larger than the original US Jeep, and this time it came with a six-cylinder. Considering the BJ model name is a code word in the English language for certain bedroom pleasures, one of the engineers came up with a nickname. If Land Rover was taken in Britain, then the Land Cruiser sounds like a great next step. By the late 50s and early 60s, these off-roaders were well established, but also a niche market. Pretty much every American and Asian army was provided with enough Jeeps, and so was every farmer in Britain. Had the market dried up? Not really, because in the meantime, some of these companies sought new ways to sell their off-roaders, which just coincided with the explosion of various automotive subcultures that really started to grow in the 1960s. No longer were these off-roaders only meant for the army, the regular buying public took also an interest as well. These were buyers seeking adventure. Going off-road was no longer a necessity, it was an activity. A way to get to hard-to-reach places and walk, hike, climb, jump, ski, dive, fish, and hunt from there.
A versatile workhorse and a playboy. Great for fishing in the deep woods, for hunting in backcountry, for family fun.
American Willys was among of the first to recognize this growing market by continuing their Jeep line but converting it into several models, including the Jeep station wagon, the Jeep truck, and especially the Jeepster, somewhat of an off-roader turned into a passenger car. These cars were often fitted with standard passenger car features that otherwise lacked on the bare-bone off-roaders. Think of heaters, radios, more comfortable seats, and interior fabrics. More manufacturers followed, like International Harvester, an American company that was otherwise associated with trucks and tractors, with their International Scout in 1961, and the Ford Motor Company with the Bronco in 1966. But it was once again Jeep that had another first, which was the very first luxury off-roader, which I consider for this video also to be the definition for an SUV. In 1962, Jeep released the Wagoneer, followed by an even more luxurious Grand Wagoneer in 1964. What is essentially a station wagon body shell dumped on a truck chassis with four-wheel drive was among the first attempts to create a luxurious SUV. Off-road capabilities, car-like comfort. Critics will say that cars like the International Travelall and the Chevrolet Suburban were earlier than the Jeep, especially the Suburban considering it dates back to the 1930s, but these are certainly SUVs but not the luxury kind, being more basic than the Wagoneer. Europe also joined the party in 1970. It was Land Rover that caught wind of what was happening back in the colonies and bought a Ford Bronco to study its underpinnings, and after a few years of development, Land Rover released the Range Rover in 1970. The Range Rover was arguably Europe's first luxury SUV, mostly intended for military officers and well-off farmers, but actually embraced by the British aristocracy. Fast forward to the 1980s and especially the 1990s, as those were the decades that the SUV as a luxury off-roader really caught on. The one that kick-started it all is once again made by Jeep. The Jeep Cherokee from 1984 is by many considered to be the first modern SUV as we know them today. From there, the SUV swarmed the American automotive market, pushing out those sleep-inducing wood-panel station wagons, as well as MPVs that were really cool in the 80s but starting to lose their edge by the 1990s. Rivaling Chevrolet released the Blazer, and Ford came up with the Explorer, before they released a huge SUV awareness marketing campaign that involved a black man driving a white Bronco. But, once again, I digress. In the second half of the 1990s, a new group of SUVs arrived, the luxury SUV. Whereas a regular SUV is a luxury off-roader, the luxury SUV is the luxury version of the luxury off-roader. Are you still with me? Good. Because it seems that Toyota was the first for a change. In 1995, Toyota released an upgraded and updated version of the Land Cruiser, sold under the rebadged name as the Lexus LX. The Americans quickly reacted with the Lincoln Navigator from Ford and the rivaling Cadillac Escalade from General Motors, both released in 1998. Also, the Europeans woke up. For almost half a century, Land Rover was the only one with the Range Rover to offer a luxury SUV. But it were the Germans that suddenly decided an SUV would be a great alternative to a regular large luxury sedan. Besides the G-Wagon, Mercedes offered the M-Class in 1997. BMW followed quickly with the release of the X5 in 1999, and Audi was actually quite late to the party with the Q7 in 2005. But it was its parent company, Volkswagen, that was actually one of the founders of yet another new SUV market segment, the sports SUV. A luxury SUV that drops its off-road capabilities altogether in favor of showing its sporty capabilities. Like, what's a better way to show off your hill climb capabilities than to win every drag race on completely flat and a smooth track? Both the Volkswagen Touareg with a massive V10 diesel, as well as a Porsche Cayenne with a twin-turbo V8 introduced the world to sports SUVs. Porsche purists cried blasphemy, but the Cayenne is the savior and the real moneymaker for the company. In order to continue to enjoy your 911, you have to buy a Cayenne. And from the 2000 onwards, numerous other SUV subcategories developed, like the convertible SUV, because you like to go off-road and still get mud on your face. Or what about the stupidest trend of late, the coupé SUV? Double the price, half the cargo space, but hey, at least they look cool. This trend arguably started by such cars like the South Korean Ssangyong Action, and if it was up to me, even the Pontiac Aztek. Both were absolutely hideous cars, but both were misunderstood, as they were just 15 years too early to the party, as every car maker these days offers a fastback-looking rock raider. And last but not least, every SUV comes in every possible size these days. They started out big, but over time, mid-size, compact, and even mini-sized SUVs were developed. But, just like I mentioned in the intro, the lines are blurry. Are these mini SUVs, or crossovers, or simply jacked-up hatchbacks? Well... And that brings us to the last category, crossovers, also nicknamed soft-roaders. Again, there is no clear distinction, but whereas many SUVs come with four-wheel drive, many crossovers do not. They are, as I said, more like jacked-up regular cars like hatchbacks and station wagons. And so to name one car that was the first to start it all is also tough. The Russians will say it was the Lada Niva, essentially a jacked-up 1970s hatchback that did come with four-wheel drive. The Europeans will scream it was the Matra Simca Rancho, somewhat of an affordable replacement of a Range Rover, but based on the Simca 1100, but without four-wheel drive. The Americans will scream it was the AMC Eagle, a jacked-up model series that included the station wagon, liftback, sedan, and even a coupe. And Japan will argue that it was the Toyota RAV4, which by modern standards is considered to be the first modern crossover, like we know them today. Anyway, whereas SUVs took the market by storm in the 90s, crossovers really started to gain traction, which they barely do on a muddy road, during the zeros in the 2010s. As much as the marketing machine tries to convince you that every crossover is an SUV, so practically every regular car can be a crossover if you truly believe in yourself. They are called crossover-styled cars. For example, my mother used to own a Volkswagen Polo, a compact city car. The car was eventually replaced by a Volkswagen Cross Polo. Exactly the same car, but just half a toenail taller than a regular Polo, and it came with an off-roadish looking plastic bumpers and roof rails. And you can bet the marketing department called this a sturdy SUV in the brochures. These days there is no getting around to it. The SUV is here to stay. In the broadest sense of the term, SUVs account for more than half of the cars sold globally in the recent years. Entire car companies abandoned other body styles and solely sell SUVs in various sizes. And even the most conservative of car brands decided to jump the ship and join the ever-growing selection of SUVs. Sure, there is quite some criticism. They are too big, too fuel-thirsty, take up too much space, and above all, so unnecessary. Most of its capabilities are never used. Maybe they should rebrand them into soggy, underutilized vehicles. And then there are car enthusiasts that cry that the automotive market is getting duller by the minute with the introduction of yet another new SUV or crossover, especially when it replaces a legendary nameplate not associated with being an off-roader in any way. But then, let's be honest here, isn't this the greatest car body style there is? Isn't this the passenger car in its purest form? Every negative is also a positive. It's spacious, practical, comfortable, easy getting in and out of, can handle most surfaces when needed, and you have a good view over the road. In fact, allow me to demonstrate the strengths of an SUV by a little comparison I unfortunately can't take credit for, but some people have noticed that dimension-wise, many modern SUVs and crossovers come dangerously close in the overall size as a standard passenger car from the 1930s. Remember, it wasn't until the 1950s and 60s, with the introduction of the longer, wider and lower, that meant that regular passenger cars started to get a lower ride height and overall height. So here you have a modern-day compact crossover, an Opel Mokka. Its overall dimensions come uncannily close to that of a standard Ford Model A from the 1930s. One is a tough and rough SUV, and the other, just an old car. So next time you complain 90% of your local parking lot is filled with the same basic boring SUVs and crossovers, remember that it's nothing new. Because if this is an SUV, so is this. If you wish to know more about what can be considered the predecessor of an SUV, click the video in the top left. If you wish to know more about a car body style that's similar to an SUV but more meant for carrying goods, click the video in the bottom left.